Good evening. Today is Wednesday, July the 3rd of 2024. I hope everybody is getting ready for a enjoyable and safe 4th of July. This is the first time this has happened since I've been making videos. On Sunday, June the 30th, 2024, I made a video, a tribute to Alberta Williams King on the exact 50th anniversary of her death. For some reason, only a small portion of this video actually was recorded, and I don't know why. So here we're going to try again. Hope we get it right this time. Alberta Christine Williams King was an American civil rights organizer best known as the wife of Martin Luther King Sr. and as the mother of Martin Luther King Jr. She was choir director at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and she was shot and killed while playing the organ. She just finished playing the Lord's Prayer. It was on June the 30th, 1974, by 23-year-old Marcus Wayne Chenault. This was just 6 years after the assassination of her oldest son. She was born September 13th, 1904, which means she was not quite 70 years old when she was killed. Her parents were Reverend Adam Daniel Williams, at the time the pastor of Ebenezer, and Jenny Celeste Parks Williams. Alberta Williams graduated from high school at Spelman Seminary and earned a teaching certificate at the Hampton Normal and Industrial Institute, now known as Hampton University, in 1924. She met a man then known as Michael King shortly before she left for Hampton. And after graduating, she announced her engagement to him at Ebenezer Baptist Church. Michael King later traveled to Germany, where he came under the influence of the reformer Martin Luther, and changed his name from Michael King to Martin Luther King Sr. She taught for a short time before their Thanksgiving Day 1926 wedding, but she had to quit because the local school board prohibited married women from teaching. That was not unusual in that day and time. And they had 3 children. And her first child was a daughter, Willie Christine King, who was born September 11th, 1927. Michael King Jr., who later became Martin Luther King Jr., was born January 15th, 1929. Alfred Daniel Williams King on July 30th, 1930. She worked hard to instill self-respect in her children. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote an essay while he studied at Crozier Seminary, stating that she was behind the scenes setting forth those motherly cares, the lack of which leaves a missing link in life. And she continued her studies at Morris Brown College in Atlanta, receiving a BA in 1938. She founded the Ebenezer Choir and served as organist from 1932 until 1972, but she still filled in some. She was still playing part of the time in 1974. She was choir director for 25 years. And leaving for a while in the 60s to accompany her son and assist him with his work. And she was also an organizer and president of Ebenezer Women's Committee. And between 1950 and 62, by the time By this period, Martin Luther King Sr. and Jr. were joint pastors, co pastors of the church. Outside of her work at Ebenezer, she was organist for the Women's Auxiliary of the National Baptist Convention in 1962, also active in the YMCA, or rather the YWCA, the Young Women's Christian Association, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She experienced a lot of tragedy from it was April 4th, 1968, that her son, Martin Luther King Jr., was assassinated while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. And then the next year, her younger son and last born, Alfred Daniel Williams King, drowned in his pool, and there was suspicion of foul play involved. Some consider that to be assassination with water. Her oldest child, I believe, passed away last year. But Alberta King was shot and killed on June 30th, 1974, by Marcus Wayne Chenault, a 23-year-old black man from Ohio. His mentor, Hananiah E. Israel, a black Hebrew Israelite preacher, rejected the New Testament, castigated black civil rights activists and church leaders as being evil and deceptive, but claimed in interviews he did not have advocated violence. Chenault did not draw any such distinction. He first had decided to assassinate Reverend Jesse Jackson in Chicago, but canceled the plan at best, or canceled the plan at the last minute. 2 weeks later, he set out for Atlanta, where he shot Alberta King with 2 handguns as she sat at the organ. And he stood up and yelled, "You're serving a false god," and fired the gun at her. Chenault said he shot King because all Christians are my enemies, and claimed he had decided that black ministers were a menace to black people. He said his original target had been her husband, but decided to shoot her instead because she was near him, and also killed one of the deacons, Edward Boykin, and wounded retired school teacher Jimmy Mitchell in the neck, but Jimmy Mitchell survived. King and Boykin were rushed to nearby Grady Memorial Hospital. Officials announced King was barely alive when she arrived at the hospital, and Boykin was pronounced dead on arrival. She died shortly afterward from a gunshot wound to the right of her head. She was interred at the Southview Cemetery in Atlanta, and her husband died of a heart attack November 11th, 1984, and was interred next to her. Chenault was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. The sentence was upheld on appeal. He later was sentenced to life in prison, partially as a result of the King family's opposition to the death penalty. On August 3, 1995, he suffered a stroke and was taken to a hospital. On August 19, 1995, he died at age 44 from complications of this stroke. I remember that event 50 years and 3 days ago like it was yesterday. It was this year, June 30th was on a Sunday. 50 years ago, it was also on a Sunday. At that time, I was living in my hometown of Waco. I had completed my coursework for my MA in church state studies at Baylor. I was living in 1015 Spate just off the Baylor campus. I had begun work on my master's thesis on the Nation of Islam. And I was one of the ministers at St. Mary's Baptist Church, located in between Waco and Belle Meade in a community at the time called No Man's Land, today known as Lincoln Park. The longtime pastor of St. Mary's was the late Reverend Dewey Pinckney, who served on the city council and was very active in civil rights and other causes. He and I were good friends, and he passed away in 1994. I have vivid memories of him, most of them of a positive nature. We didn't always agree. He had his faults, he had his critics, but who doesn't? I do remember how emotional he became. Someone, I don't know who it was, brought word that Mrs. King had been shot and killed. He couldn't continue. He had everybody stand. He made some remarks and prayed. Service ended. Everybody went home. I imagine later that day I went to the Baylor Library. I know I went to the Baylor Library to work on my thesis, and one of my friends, had a carrel in the basement near mine, and his observation was, he said that, Dr. King's widow, Coretta Scott King, was in the public eye as an activist, and someone who had a personal axe to grind might want to go after her. But he asked the question, who'd want to kill his mother? What had she done? Well, that's the way deranged individuals work. Their minds don't work rationally at all. But at this point, again, I wish to say God bless Alberta King, God bless the King family, and God bless everyone listening to this video. Happy 4th of July.